Yay, it finally worked. I've been trying to get this Google Slide doc to work for probably close to 10 minutes now. So glad that it is finally now working. So what this screencast is about is there's going to be two poems. One's going to be the analysis of baseball, and the other one's Alone in the Nets. What we're going to do is we're going to read both of these poems together. We're going to start with analysis of baseball. I will then give you some questions that I want you to think about, and we'll go over the answers together. And then the second poem, Alone in the Nets, you're just going to listen to the audio recording of it, and then you are responsible for going back and answering the Google Forms questions that I have about that poem. So, analysis baseball. In the poem Analysis of Baseball, the poet vividly describes different ways in which a ball, a bat, and a mitt can interact, evoking a sense of spirit in the simple but exciting game of baseball. So hopefully the title itself, Analysis of Baseball, gave it away that this poem is about baseball, in fact. So, reminder from screencast yesterday, three main ideas of poetry that you need to understand so far. The first thing is structure, so the way the poem looks on the page. Yesterday, we talked about how the poem was in the center of the picture of lettuce. All right, we also talked about lines, so lines can be a single word, sentence, or part of a sentence. And then lastly, stanzas. This is when lines are arranged into groups. So basically, think about stanzas as almost looking like paragraphs, but it's poetry, so it's not a paragraph, it's a stanza. So we're going to talk about the text analysis and reading strategy with these poems. This is something, if we were at school, we would be doing this first. So structure of a poem. All right, talked about in the last slide. Structure is the way a poem looks on the page. This slide with text analysis says one of the first things you will notice about poems is that they are made up of lines. A line of poetry can be a complete sentence, part of a sentence, or even a single word. So poetry does not necessarily follow the same rules that regular essay writing does. All right. So short lines might give a poem a fast, choppy rhythm or beat. Long lines might give it a smoother and slower rhythm. So we will talk more about rhythm as this unit continues. But pretty much what you have to take away from that is that the length of the line can depend on how the reader sees or understands what's happening in the poem itself. So poets use line breaks or places where the lines of poetry end to add emphasis to certain words or phrases, and you'll see that in this poem. The next part says some poets use other stylistic elements for effects, so unusual punctuation, again, not necessarily following the same rules as we would typically have to follow if we were writing an essay, unusual word banks, and unusual spacing. So what you need to pay attention to with these poems is what do they look like? What is their structure like, and how does that influence the meaning of the poem? The reading strategy, pretty easy, reading poetry out loud. So usually poetry is meant to be heard as well as read. Many poems have rhyming words or repeated sounds at the end of words that are easier to notice when the poem is read out loud. It is important that you are able to hear what the, I guess I should say the poet, author, the poet is what it's called, is trying to explain. And the reason why you can read it out loud is that you can see that there might be emphasis put on certain words or phrases, and it's easier to notice the post punctuation and line breaks and pace your reading, which is really important with pacing your reading, figuring out how you should be reading the poem. And that's why I'm showing, or not really showing, but having you guys listen to the audio recordings, because it's really important to me that you get that right away. All right, and that's something we would have done if we were in the classroom. So the last part on here says poems might also include onomatopoeia. So this is something we've talked about before. Words that sound like what they mean, such bang, thump, pop, crack, you name it. If it's word, that's sound, it's onomatopoeia. In addition to helping you hear sounds, these elements emphasize a poem's meaning. So going on to strategies for reading poetry. So these strategies can be applied to any poem, and it's just something to think about. First thing, visualize the images. If there's any images provided with the poem, what does that do to help you better understand what's happening possibly, or what the poem might be about? Also, reading the poem out loud. So we just talked about that. think about the words and phrases. So think about why the author chose to use certain words or phrases and how does that affect the meaning. And then lastly, identify the speaker. So the speaker is who is actually talking in the poem. So some questions I want you to think about. One says, what noise words or onomatopoeia are used in the poem so far? 2, find at least 5 rhymes. And 3, what is the effect of all these short lines? And then finally 4, who is the speaker in this poem? So at this point, I'm going to exit full screen. On this side of the screen, I have what is the textbook. So during the audio recording, I just want you to pay attention and we will be going back to these questions later.
Analysis of Baseball, May Swenson.
You are about to read 2 poems that focus on the world of sports. May Swenson's Analysis of Baseball breaks a baseball game down into its smallest parts. Alone in the Nets by Arnold Adolph follows a soccer player's thoughts during a stressful game. Read along to take a fresh look at the sports people play.
It's about the ball, the bat, and the mitt. Ball hits bat, or it hits mitt. Bat doesn't hit ball. Bat meets it. Ball bounces off bat, flies air, or thuds ground, dud. Or it fits mitt. Bat waits for ball to mate. Ball hates to take bat's bait. Ball flirts. Bat's late. Don't keep the date. Ball goes in, thwack, to mitt, and goes out, thwack, back to mitt. Ball fits mitt, but not all the time. Sometimes ball gets hit, pow, when bat meets it, and sails to a place where mitt has to quit in disgrace. That's about the bases loaded. About 40,000 fans exploded. It's about the ball, the bat, the mitt, the bases, and the fans. It's done on a diamond, and for fun. It's about home, and it's about run.
So that is the analysis of baseball. As you can see, it's 2 columns of lines. So you have to remember when you're thinking about structure, what does the poem actually look like? If I look at it, I see this is going to be the first stanza, and then there's break, second stanza, third stanza, break, and then last stanza. So there are actually 4 stanzas in this one. So I'm going to try my best to try to get the questions possibly up at the same time. I don't know if that will work. But when you think about noise words or onomatopoeia used in the poem so far, there's a couple of different examples of this in this particular poem. So for this, I'm going to think it's probably easier for me just to go over the answers so you guys get to actually see what's going on. And I wish I could move this over more, but oh well. So the first question asks onomatopoeia words. There's 3. All right. So we have dud, which is right here. All right. Line 15, or right before line 15, I should say line 14. We have thwack, which is down here. And then we also have, and there's a second thwack right there, actually. And then we also have the word pal right here. So all those are in parentheses. All of those words are examples of onomatopoeia because they are words that sound what they, or are said how they sound. Okay. So for rhyming words, the question said to find 5. There's multiple of this. And this is where I really wish I had a pen already out. But as you can see, the first one, hit, it says hits, it, mitt. So hits, it, mitt. All right, line 5, line 6, line 7. All those last words rhyme. Moving on to lines 11, 12, 13, and 14. Thuds, duds. Again, same pattern. It's the last 2 words in those lines that rhyme. the other part, there's a whole bunch right here: waits, mates, hates, bait, late, date, and that's all in this second stanza. So there's a lot of rhyming going on here. If we go up here, we'll see fits, mit, hit, quit. And as you see with that one, a lot of the rhyming words they're still in that stanza together, but they're a little bit placed in different places. So as you can see with rhyming, it pretty much seems to be going off of the stanza it is found in. And then the last one is place and disgrace were in here as well. And then lastly, loaded and exploded both rhyme as well. And then the last stanza, there is not any rhyming found there. So the biggest thing with finding rhyming words is that you need to look in the stanzas and you need to say them out loud. When I go to try to find rhyming words in a poem, I say it out loud. And you also have to remember the third question, which is what is the effect of the short lines? Short lines and line breaks emphasize the last word in each line. So ball, bat, mitt, bases, and fans. If you look through here, and I know I'm going through this pretty quickly, it's because I've ran over my amount of time that I'm supposed to make the screencast last. But all of those words are there to be emphasized. These are short lines. And as I said before, there are line breaks there as well. And then finally, the speaker of the poem is a baseball player, which should have been pretty obvious. They were talking about the game, what's going on between the bat and the mitt, and all the different aspects of baseball. So since I went over time on this one, I'm just going to end this here. The next part, you are going to listen to the screencast I will do about the being alone in the nets, and then you will answer the Google Forms for that. So if you have any questions, please reach out. All right, bye. Feel like I'm hanging up a phone still.